He is Corey Stewart, running for the aforementioned U.S. Senate, and with all eyes on the Senate over the Supreme Court nominee. Corey, good morning. How are you doing, sir?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show this morning, Joe.
CoreyStewart.com, Corey Stewart VA on Twitter as well, how you follow him. And a quick programming note, July 21st, it's a Saturday. We're going to carry with a little pregame show and then the U.S. Senate debate, the annual Summer Virginia Bar Association conference is highlighted by a debate of some note, and it's the U.S. Senate candidate, so be ready for it. You'll be on the air. I don't know if they'll let me put a red light anywhere in there, but we'll be tuned in on the 21st. Corey, what are your thoughts on Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court nominee, first and foremost?
I think the guy is great. And look, he's got a long record. He's a professor of teaches law at Harvard and Yale and Georgetown. You couldn't have found a better qualified jurist. And President Trump fulfilled his promises of appointing a conservative, somebody who will interpret the Constitution according to its original intent. So, of course, the Democrats are having a conniption fit here. Not too surprising.
So, and Mark Warner even equivocated. He's like, well, I'll have to look into his record a little bit more. So even he wasn't as hair on fire as Elizabeth Warren and some of the other folks in there. Are there any concerns that he seemed to, and some of the folks brought up the Affordable Care Act ruling as a appellate judge where he said, listen, there's no standing here yet. Nobody's been charged a tax in this yet. Once there's a tax, levied, then we can talk about it. But he was the one that really started the whole, nobody has been impacted by Obamacare yet. So once that's happened, bring it back to us and we'll rule on it.
Yeah, and then of course you've got Virginia's other senator who's been completely silent on all of this, and I think we're going to have to hold his feet to the fire. But at some point, Kane's going to have to come out and make his position clear on not just this but other issues as well.
Now, the president is off in Europe now, and the European leaders are all up in arms as well. The head of the European Union saying he's not respecting us. And talk about NATO, talk about the European Union and some of these international entanglements that do come across Virginia's Senate desks over these years, and where we should be going forward from here, Corey.
Joe, we've never really had a reset since World War II. Right after World War II, the United States entered into a strong alliance with Western Europe, NATO, and the idea was that they needed the U.S. security blanket to defend against a possible Soviet invasion. Well, all these years later, as Europe has gotten much, much more wealthy, and is just as wealthy as the United States. And even to this day, though, the United States is spending so much more on its military and its military readiness than the Europeans. We're upwards of $700 billion a year, and the European allies together account for about $200 billion a year. We're spending so much more. As a percentage of GDP, they promised to bring it up to 2%. And even Germany, the wealthiest, largest member of NATO outside of the United States, is only at 1.5%. They have not fulfilled their promises. They're basically, just piggybacking on the United States, and our taxpayers are having to pay for their defense. And the president is right to say, look, you got to start standing up for yourselves. You got to start bearing a fair share of the load.
Well, and certainly as we watch some of the issues that have come across Europe, and it seems like they're upset about things that they could have a say about if there was a little bit more of an internal defense mechanism there, Corey. When it comes down to it, whether it be North Korea and certainly the negotiations kind of going back and forth there, or Europe, and then we watch the tariffs the debate coming up, which is the one that you think is going to be the most impactful come November in this Senate race?
Well, I think the tariff one, because there you've got you've got a direct impact on the United States, and that, especially with regard to China, but with regard to the Europeans as well. They're getting away with they're basically able to ship their goods into the United States free of tariffs. One example is automobiles. They can export a foreign-made automobile into the United States with a 2.5% tariff. You want to export a U.S.-made vehicle, however, to the European Union, they charge a 10% tariff, and then the Chinese charge a 25% tariff on U.S.-made automobiles. The result of all this is they empty out the American manufacturing sector. You have all these towns that have been wiped out that used to be, thriving towns based upon a manufacturing, jobs and so forth, and it's all gone. We have to right that wrong. We have to bring back these good jobs, manufacturing jobs to the United States, if we're to allow for middle-class wages and for working people to have good jobs once again.
Does labor law have to be investigated? I mean, I've always said that tariffs are only half the story. The regulatory landscape of a business in the United States, the taxation and the labor laws, do they have to be looked at as well, Corey?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's not just, like you mentioned, Joe, it's not just the tariffs that, for example, the Chinese throw on American-made goods to keep American-made goods out. But there's other things, too. There's non-tariff barriers, and there's unfair trade practices. There's lack of protection for American intellectual property and manufacturing know-how. There are inadequate protections on labor. And one of the things that, this is Tim Kaine. Why is it that you want to put all of these environmental standards, unnecessary environmental standards, on American businesses? But yet, you don't care that the Chinese are manufacturing goods with zero protections for the environment, zero protections for their labor, and as a result, you're getting all this Chinese products that are being shipped into the United States with no tariffs on them, that were produced with no protections on labor, no protections on the environment. It's destroying our manufacturing base, and it's causing even more pollution for the planet than if those products have been manufactured in the United States.
Hey, Corey, we appreciate it. We'll probably see you before the 21st, but definitely then out at the homestead as well. CoreyStewart.com, Corey Stewart VA on Twitter as well. Thank you, sir. You have a great morning.
Thank you, Joe.
WCHV time, 8:14.